Good evening and welcome back to this special series on sex offenses as part of Florida Criminal Law TV. I am your host, Stephen G. Cobb, attorney at law. Now, as we're going through this series, I'm using real-life examples of actual cases and how we defend them at trial. In this particular case, somebody was smart enough to call me early. What do I mean? A lot of times when people are being investigated for sex offense cases, they think to themselves, gosh, I'm not guilty, and I called this lawyer and it's tens of thousands of dollars to defend myself, so I'll do it myself. That's called how to get arrested, not have a bond, lose your case, and be designated a sex offender for the rest of your life after you get out of prison and there's nothing you can do about it because you tried to handle it on your own. This is far more common than you could imagine. Well, this young military service member was smart enough not to do that. And here's the backstory of what happened to John Doe. John Doe meets this beautiful woman, we'll call her Jane Smith. And he and Jane Smith have an incredible connection. He's still seeing other people. She's still seeing other people in the beginning, but then drops it off as she wants to become more serious. And they're exploring their sexuality. How are they exploring their sexuality? Well, in their particular case, they enjoyed bondage, submission, domination, and masochism. Well, BDSM. So they would do things like he would tie her up. He would spank her rather sharply on the rear end. She liked to be spanked on her breast. She liked to have her face slapped. In other words, she was getting into rough sex, and it was thrilling for him and it was thrilling for her. And sure enough, one day as they were playing, his finger missed the cheek part and caught her right below the eye, and as a result, it blackened this area in here. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a facial injury there. I hope not. I have, and so have many other people, and all of us would tell you that if you get a bruise up in this area on either eye, it's very easy to get a bruise, and secondly, they stay there for a while. So this couple continued to see each other after this tie-up, slap in the face event, and sure enough, afterwards they were cooking together and laughing about it, and one of the roommates was there. This guy had a couple of roommates who knew her, knew him, knew they were seeing each other, knew that he was seeing other people. They didn't know what she was doing. I found that out later. And sure enough, they were laughing and joking about the bruise with one of the roommates. Well, as time goes on, she becomes increasingly jealous, and she had also seen her mother. And when she saw her mother took one look at the bruise on the eye, and you can figure out what happened. I mean, think about it. How many times has consensual sexual activity resulted in a false allegation when someone, usually female, but not always, will talk to her friends, talk to family members, maybe it was drunken consent. Both parties are drunk, they have consensual sex, and the next day her friends say, girl, you were raped. She wasn't raped at all. And in this particular case, Mom said, what happened? And made her tell the whole story. And by the way, she also had a depressive illness. This does not mean automatically that people with depression are going to be guilty of crimes. But I do think it affected her, because the next thing you know, she's talking to Mom, and there's an investigation, and he gets called by an investigator to give his side of the story. Well, what he did was, instead of giving a story, he was smart enough to call me. And I said, not at all. So the first thing I did was we prepared a notice of demand to notify counsel and notice of invocation of rights. The heck is that? It basically says, under the advice of counsel, I'm not answering any questions unless my lawyer is there. And based on case law, you might want to look at Shook versus State, because in the First Judicial Circuit, it was actually a carjacking case I handled many years ago. It was very clear that when the defendant said, get me an attorney right now, he was unequivocally invoking his rights. That's in the case law of Florida, a case I actually handled. Well, it's been that way for a long time. That's why we won on appeal. And likewise, that's why in this case we had written documentation with his signature on it. He kept a copy. I contacted the law enforcement investigator immediately, made sure he got a copy, and then I actually did the investigator's work for him and found 3 different witnesses who would testify to different aspects of, yes, they had consensual sex, yes, I saw her with a bruise, yes, they were laughing about it while cooking in the kitchen, and then they broke up. Well, sure enough, we were able to kill a warrant before it became a sexual battery case. And unlike the last one that I told you about, where somebody had financial interest, it was pretty apparent that this was not a financial interest case at all. It was, let's please mom, and it was also, he didn't treat me right because he was dating other women and now I'm going to get him back. Believe it or not, people will do these things. Now, we all want to believe, and in fact, sexual abuse investigators in the medical profession, like the counties, and name your county here kind of a thing in Florida, we have 67, whatever doctor does the medical exams for sex offense cases, because there's almost always a medical exam if it's recent, they're going to tell you that they believe the accuser because they're trained to believe the accuser, not to be skeptical, which from a legal perspective makes no sense whatsoever. The theory being, well, if we don't believe the accuser, we're victimizing him twice. But hey, it's okay to victimize somebody who's falsely accused, like this young military member was. Now, you also have to remember, I could tell you tons of stories about false domestic violence cases and false sexual abuse allegations involving military members. Why? A combination of payback and financial interest. But that's beyond the scope of this particular video, where we've covered a different defense altogether. A combination of payback and social pressure. Believe it or not, social pressure results in false accusations. And if you or someone you love has been accused of a sex offense that doesn't quite fit this category, feel free to give me a call and I'll be happy to answer all of your questions.